some time. Okay, good morning, everyone, and the warmest of welcome to our last council meeting for this triennium. And I will open our hui for us today. I ask that everyone stand. Dear God, thank you for bringing us together today to look back on 3 years together. Thank you that you have guided us through these very weird 3 years. Thank you for the opportunities we have had. Thank you for guiding us to make decisions with and on behalf of our community. We ask your protective hand in and over our community in these past few unsettled days. Thank you for all the blessings we receive from your gracious hand. Amen. Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, I am going to set out the day for us before we start, set out my expectations of where we will get and what timeframes we will apply. And as always, you will take no notice and we will be here longer. So what I was thinking before we start with our official council agenda, you will see today that the bulk of our agenda is taken up by our annual report, and staff will be doing a presentation and walking us through our annual report. And then we've got about 4 or 5 smaller other agenda items that we will deal with. It's my expectation that we will be finishing either before morning tea or before lunch. We'll see how it goes, but I think we're aiming to be finished by 12. So without further ado, I will ask for apologies. Full house here today. What a great working team. Thank you for that. Any declarations of interest? Nothing. I'm going to say it once before we start. Microphones.
Madam Chair, the War Memorial Theatre Trust, but then since it's my report to this committee, it needs to be accurate.
Good. So both Councillor Seymour and myself are trustees on the War Memorial Trust. So just note that. Okay, councillors, I take you to page 5. You can see we've got 2 sets of minutes this morning. So we first have our meeting of the 11th of August, and then also just the public excluded minutes, August 11. Any questions? Moved by Councillor Sheldrick. You're happy to move both sets? Seconded by Councillor Faulkner. Any questions or queries? Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Should we start how we mean to go on?
Yes.
Too, that we should stand at council meetings, and then we set a good example for the
Good,
future.
thank you for that.
Just a point of clarification. It is in relation to 11.5 on page 11, and it's only that probably a word has got missing. It's a bullet point beginning, the 2.9 million includes paying for and collecting the curbside selection. Now, I think that means the selection of various receptacles, but if you weren't part of the conversation that we had at the time, it might not be overly clear what exactly that means. So could just that be grammatically tidied up so it's clear for people coming after us?
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions or queries, I'll put it to the floor. All in favour, contrary, carried. Why are you waving out, Larry? You've got a question? Yep. Yes.
Just on page.
Stand up.
Just on page 9, with the Kiwa Pools fees and charges as a late item, it's come to my attention that in the fees and charges, there's no annual fee for annual subscription to the pool. So I'm not quite sure whether that's an intention or whether it's been missed out. Yes. So
Ms. Sutherland, thank you.
Through you, the Chair. We're currently out for community consultation, and we'll be bringing a paper to council later in the year following that engagement and any adjustments to the fees and charges for Kiwa Pools.
Okay, so that annual fee could be part of it.
Considered through that process.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, I take you to our action sheet, which there are 2 actions there with updates, one from Tim, one from Michelle, and the due dates. Any questions in regards or updates? It looked quite clear to me. If not, we move on to our governance work plan. And then I take everyone to page 25 and I'll hand over to the CEO to do a presentation, and then we'll open this document for discussion to the floor. Thank you, Ms. Thatcher Swan.
Your Worship, just see if we've got a PowerPoint in our pointer. Thank you. O morena koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's our privilege to present to you our collective annual report this year. And what we thought we might do is just go through some of there was a lot of information, and if you had a hard copy, we've got that much worth. So we've gone through and pulled out some of the highlights, and we'll talk a bit, Pauline will talk to some of the financial information, and then each of the directors will just talk to key parts in the area, and then after that we'll open up for questions. But what I thought would start with is just a recap in terms of the wider context within which we were operating, within which many organisations and businesses were operating over the last 2021-22 financial year, and in particular the emergence of the Omicron variant and the subsequent lockdown commencing in August 17, and the traffic light system that had an impact on the way that we do business, isolation requirements, gatherings, limits on gatherings, the way that we interacted with each other and how we communicated and engaged with our community. That also had impacts on, and we would have discussed this over the course of the year in terms of the supply chain and the way that we manage procurement. So it did cause some significant delays. Not to mention our 4 major weather events and 2 local state of emergencies, which one of them was extended over a period of time, which caused around $26 million worth of damage in terms of our infrastructure. And on top of that, we were also seeing and starting to respond to central government reforms, including the RMA, the 3 waters, the key decision being made around October. So there was a lot on in terms of the wider context within which this annual report reflects in terms of our achievement. So just some key highlights, and I think this is key, that despite that the significant impacts that were happening in the environment, that we ended off our financial year financially strong. So our debt and our overall performance is strong. One of the key things here is that we achieved more external grants and subsidies. So that was over the long-term plan. I think we had calculated for about 60% to come from rates. What we've done in terms of acquiring more external grants and subsidies is that we've seen rates account for 43% of our total income, which is significant in terms of achievement. Our debt position is well within its limit, and while it's lower than what we had expected, it's still, and Pauline will show some slides, very comparable, very low compared to other councils as well. Capital investment, it's slightly higher than we invested last year, so it's 79 million. And there have been some delays, primarily in terms of the receipt of, well, it's in terms of the impacts that we've had over the last year. Along with that, we're still on track to complete our major projects. So you would, in the site visits, you've seen progress being made around our Kiwa pools and our wastewater upgrades. We've also been doing a lot of policy work with you. You've been brave and bold around adopting a 2030 net zero emissions target, progressing some freshwater mahi in that space with a grant from MFE, a significant one of $2.3 million combined with council's investment. and work to, $2.2 million, and lots of work, and the effects of the work, accumulation of that has been seen on the agenda today in terms of work to be a good treaty partner, and the decision made around co-governance and principle to establish co-governance committee, and not to mention the establishment of Māori wards in the representation review process. So overall, it's been a significant, another significant year. Disappointingly, though, what we've seen is, and we understand that in some of the community satisfaction measures haven't been where we would like them to be. And we know that this has been impacted. All councils across New Zealand are seeing that in terms of the community engagement with local government, central government generally. So I mean, hopefully we will see that pick up if our context is a little bit more favourable going forward. But overall, there was about a shift in 4% in terms of our levels of service, non-financial performance measures, which we'll be focusing on coming into the new financial year.
This snapshot you have up here is actually the same as what we presented to Finance and Performance on the 14th of September. So those results were the same. And in that report, it gave a full commentary of the explanations, and the same as with the capital expenditure. But just to recap, the main one is that council received a net surplus of 38.8 million, which, and it's moved a little bit in things, so it's hard to see the circles, and okay, apologies. So this here, it says it's the 38.6 million. This was the budget, and then we said that we're a little bit less than what we expected to be. Now, what we said that was a result of was not receiving some of the capital grants. Now, the capital grants related to the provincial, the Road and Provincial Growth Fund, which was a 3 to 5 year deliverable, which was impacted by the March, April, and that couldn't actually finish by the 30th of June. But, and also the Kiwi Pool timing and the 1,000-year bridge. So those grants still will occur and we will still receive them, but it just means we receive them as the project progresses. Revenue, as I said, at the top is this one up here. It's a little bit more than what we anticipated, but that's due to receiving from Whakamutunga and the PGF funds, mostly arriving from the emergency works. And then, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth from the microphone. Then the other one's expenditure. We had more expenditure than what was planned, and that is predominantly in relation to the 19.8 million of emergency works that was completed in the last year, but we had corresponding more funds to pay for that. So on this one here is the benchmarks, and these benchmarks are governed by the local government financial reporting and prudence regulations. They were first developed so that to identify for central government any local authorities that were needed further inquiry in relation to the financial management, but it was also to provoke prudent financial management by local authorities. But essentially what these are saying for what we achieved for this year is that these financial measures, which measure how council plan to do their financial performance against the actual results, they help assess us if we're prudently managing its revenue, expenses, assets, liabilities, and general financial dealings. All financial benchmarks have been met and well within the financial measures. In this graph, it's just to give you what we did in this and what we've done in the last 10 years in terms of capital investment. Previously, we can see that over the last 10 years is around 38 million, but in the last 2 years, we've had the record measures of nearly 79 million in the last 2 years. We expected to do more. And as we said in the others, what were the delays with that? And most of it was the timing, as we said, where we phased it to be hit the end of this year, which was the PGF roading resilience, which will occur into the next part, still within the 3 to 5 years program deliverable of the PGF funding. Slightly changes with the keel poles and a little bit of the wastewater treatment plant. All of those major projects will still be in the timelines that they originally set, but it didn't quite make all of the measures within our annual plan timeframes. So in this one here is pretty fundamental to, if you like, our financial strategy. It's saying, well, what makes up our revenue? And as Nadine mentioned in the first part of this, that where we normally say that revenue will rates revenue will make up about 60%, because of receiving more capital grants, it actually has reduced to 43%, which means by getting more funds elsewhere externally means we can do more than what we would have been able to do otherwise. So this one is our comparable, what we always put in our financial summary document, which is at the end of it. Now, unfortunately, you have to compare the other unitaries. So this is comparing the other 3 other unitaries, the same as with ourselves, but their information for their annual report is only at the 2021. A lot of their won't be adopted until Christmas time, so we haven't got those full comparatives. So what we do is we compare with what we have with those other years. So in terms of this, you see what we had this year, but then you have the comparatives for what they were the other years. Some of the things that are really of note that stands out is our total assets. We are now at 2.9 billion, and compared to the others, we are significantly above the other unitaries. We also look at the rates comparatives. We at that point we're lower, but this is where we are. It shows from another year on. So it's a significant portfolio that council has, they have to manage, and what we're actually trying to do it for the different parts, what we have available to us. And I think that might be Kia ora, everyone. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a brief about what's been happening with resource consents and building consents this year. As you can imagine, with the bit of a building boom that Tairāwhiti is going through, it makes both those departments quite busy. You can see sort of at the bottom there, we've had over 900 building consents and over 651 resource consents. So with the building consents, as you can imagine, they come with a bunch of inspections each. So that's thousands of inspections that our team has been out there doing in the community. That has resulted, given the workload, it has resulted in a few delays, obviously with COVID too, that impacts both the building sector and our ability to service that sector. But we've been working really hard to get back on track, and you'll be pleased to know that this week and last week, basically, this month we've been back up to 100% on time. So that's been really good. Also in the resource consent area, we've been struggling a little bit with the workload. It's been quite high, and we've had a few, sicknesses and staff shortages in that area as well. But that tends to be a bit of a national problem at the moment. So, we're doing some things to work through that, but our numbers don't look as flash as I would like to present to you in terms of timeframes, but we're getting through the work and working well with our developers. In relation to our compliance functions, we've been doing some improvement in relation to the way that we record our time for compliance, making sure that we're more timely and accurate in our responses to people coming in and letting us know that there's something out there in the community that they're concerned about.
We've also been doing, a lot of training to upskill our staff so that they're, appropriately informed when they go out and look at things that are happening out in our community. We have made some good improvements in relation to our oil spill response timeframes. We've managed to move our oil spill response kit and our equipment to the port from our Bank Street location, which has improved our response times in the harbour, which has been really good. We also, as most of you will be aware, have some new bling for our dogs in our district. So instead of the little plastic tags that become a bit of a nuisance to everybody, we've got lifetime tags available for members of the community, so for the lifetime of the animal, and they're little metal tags that hang around their neck and hold some information about the dog. So they're quite good in terms of the effect on the environment, but also in terms of cost savings for the customers. What we'll be focusing on going into the next financial year is, dealing with that influx of building and, community and social housing that's going on. It's a really neat space to be involved in, but obviously it means there's a lot of work to deal with and come to grips with. We're also keeping up to date with the new impending changes to the RMA and what effects that will have on the consenting processes and the compliance processes that we go through at council. So that's quite high on our priority list in terms of making sure that we're prepared for that. And then obviously we will continue to do our monitoring and inspection of at-risk areas and make sure that we're really on top of those high risk consents that can go wrong, but hopefully don't. And that's it from me.
Kia ora tātou. So Lifelines has had a pretty big year. As Nadine and Pauline have both talked about, we've had a couple of events that I'm sure we're all well aware of. For Land Rivers and Coastal, a lot of the mahi this year has actually been working with our community on some really big projects in the likes of Tokomaru Bay, Enoda Bay, also at Makarika, but some of the nice ones that they've been doing in the background, for example, with Rangatira Marae out at Tīmatanga, looking at how do we future-proof them from flooding events. For those of you may have seen it, this is the marae that was completely surrounded by water in a couple of those events, and it was just their little stop bank that was saving that site from going under. So talking about how do we future-proof those places going forward. And that is around climate change, but it's also around as we upgrade our Waipawa flood control scheme, how do we look after them? So a lot of work's being done with the community, looking at some of the solutions and how do we work forward with the events that we've been having. On the lighter side of things, the Waipawa flood control scheme, the cycleway opening on top of the flood control scheme, connecting up from Centennial Marine Drive all the way up to the Matawhito Bridge was quite a neat event, and it's a really cool trail for those who've ridden it. I'm sure you'll agree. It's a pretty nice way to look at the Poverty Bay flats out there. For roads, our biggest thing for us as a team was very much the procurement of the new maintenance contracts that we're under now. Very different setup, very different KPIs, very different ways of doing work that we're starting to see benefits from with our community already. Part of that being that bottom point there around the roading information, our website, it's up there now. You can see when they're going to be coming back through for grading. You know when we're going to be doing works in your area. So on the website now, plug in your road, you'll be able to see when they're next due to come up through there. That's something that I know there's been a lot of frustration around this table, but it's actually front-footed now. It's updated every month as to where they're going to be, if they're in front or behind. So you can actually see and know when to expect them to be on any road within our district, which is quite a cool change. The other part we've been working through, particularly with Joe Noble's team, around looking at how we're doing our procurement for walking and cycling strategies, how we're going to potentially change our public transport going forward, and seeing how we can get a better solution there for our community, how we can better connect up our district, and how we can make best use of our public transport system. For solid waste, they've been doing some really amazing things with a lot of the schools within Tairāwhiti. There's been some fantastic support from the H.B. Williams Trust to help us to be able to carry on with our Enviro Schools campaign, working with the schools across the region with our coordinators, but also some great work with the Tairāwhiti Environment Centre around our e-waste collection schemes, which has been hugely successful this year. and making sure that we're able to not just do one-offs of those things, but how do we turn those into progressive things that we're able to do for a longer period of time. So more than 10 tonnes of e-waste went through the Tairāwhiti Environment Centre, which is a huge amount for that organisation, but a really good result for our community because it means that's being diverted from landfill and we can reuse those resources. The highlight for me for emergency management has been the team and the way that they responded and supported our community through the last 2 events that we had this year. And when I say that, it's absolutely the wider team. So it's our emergencies partners, it's our community resilience groups, and the way that our community looked after each other in the last 2 events, particularly the longer one, as Nadine referred to. It's the longest one we've had in a long time, and it was really amazing to see our community wrap around and look after each other. The preparedness that the team have been working on, the earthquake drills, the tsunami hikoi, all of those things we've topped the country on. When it came to the shakeout, we had the largest number of people who were registered for that and participating. But then also around preparedness, the resilience with our Marae project, working through how we're going to make sure particularly our remote communities are supported and they have some supplies for those events that we know that we won't be able to get in to help them out. So it's been a lot of work, but a lot of preparedness and a lot of learnings for civil defence and emergency management the last 12 months. Our wastewater and urban stormwater, so the wastewater treatment plant there, that has been ticking on, really pleased with the progress for what's been happening there. But then also we've had the mortuary waste project, so the bylaw going through, working on the implementation of the Wisconsin mound out there. One of the littler known ones, I know Councillor Seymour's well aware of it, at Parkinson Street. So a lot of the upgrade that happened there, piping and getting rid of what was quite a dangerous deep swale drain there, was quite dangerous for cars, dangerous for kids on bikes because it was a very deep drain. So having that project underway was a really cool one to be able to do for the Oahu community. Water supply, the big one there has been the Muriwai Township. So we're online and expected to have that open by December for the community supply point out of Muriwai. So that's been a huge job getting that put in over the railway bridge and out to Muriwai. So the pipe is pretty much there, which is awesome. And with Ruatoria, we have been working up there, and it's around the solution there is going to take us a little bit longer, but we've been able to partner with Ngāta College, with Whakadua Park and others to be able to do quite a neat solution for up at Ruatoria. So that will still be on track to be done by the end of this financial year. For us, the big focus in Lifelines, as always, is our capital works program. So very much making sure we have that front and centre to catch up on anything that was delayed from last year. And most of the work is on track, as Nadine has said, for us in capital work. So we will be catching that up. It will be able to be delivered this year. Obviously, the uncertainty is the Three Waters changes and what they mean for Tairāwhiti. That's a big focus for us in Lifelines, particularly for the staff affected, the assets, those things, making sure we know what's happening and how we can best get the outcome we need for Tairāwhiti. Civil defence will always be around preparedness, response and recovery. It sounds boring because I say it every time, but it is a huge focus for us, making sure we learn from any event we have had and take those lessons forward into the next one. And as we know, it's not a long time between drinks with our civil defence emergencies, unfortunately. And the last big one there is obviously our wheelie bin rollout, which is a huge thing that we'll be looking for how we spend the funds that you've given us from our Three Waters changes to how we implement a better system for our waste and recycling for our district.
Kia ora tātou, I'm filling in for Michelle Frey, Director of Livable Communities, to update you on the annual report for Livable Communities. So starting with the integrated catchments and biodiversity teams. So a cool initiative was set up this year with the educational resources for the regional animal and plant pest management plan. So that's a cool initiative where public can get that information and engage and have support as to what they can do on their land. The Whakamutunga project has gone from strength to strength, great leadership from Hilton Collier and the team, with some support from integrated catchments. Biosecurity, we've got a full complement of staff, which is no mean feat, and they are responding well to the KPIs set out in the annual plan. The Waimata upper catchment work continues. So great support from the teams there to support landowners. The 5 farm owners in the upper catchment have set up their initial possum knockdown, which is working well to support the wider work, and proposed works that commence over the next financial year. Support for the Tairāwhiti whenua. So June care program continues with 2,000 grasses. Programs. 2 weeks. Street tree planting. Tokomaru Bay Public Convenience that was completed this last year, and the community facilities early wins continue, led by the Tairāwhiti Adventure Trust with skate park and pump track, with council's team, livable community supporting that mahi. New pump track at Alfred Cox was completed, and changes to our freedom camping bylaw have been implemented. Key focuses for the year: progressing the community facilities strategy business case and delivering on those early wins. Successful completion and opening of the Kiwi pools is a major for our hub. Continue to grow and establish our relationships with partners, particularly mana whenua, recreational services and community groups. Finding solutions and progressing the delivery of key community projects, including Te Panuku 2 on Tīmatanga Summit, Peel Street toilets re-strengthening and Whakamutunga. Successful completion of the MFA Freshwater Farm Environment Plan pilot, and delivering on the JGG for the restoring the Waipu initiative as part of that 100-year plan.
If you just flip forward on that one, I think the next slide is James, and he's not here today. No.
In James' absence, I know that you've been on this journey with us with the representation review and its outcomes, and subsequently the elections are well underway, with quite a thorough engagement plan in place. Our core information services are being upgraded. This is the stuff that you don't see, it's all behind the scenes. And there's been an initial release of the financials, human resources and payroll. The work's underway on that.
Kia ora koutou, we're doing a bit of a tag team here. So standing in for James, of course. So cultural activities, at the moment it's under internal partnerships. And I just want to take this opportunity here to thank the council and so much for the impact that it's going to make from the start of this financial year onwards with the abolition of overdue fines at the library. It's probably one of the most significant things to happen with a community impact in decades, really. So that time will tell how that works. And in the theatres this year, last year, we've managed to get this far without anyone mentioning COVID-19, but in fact, that has been a massive impact across the community facilities. And the theatres, both theatres were used for civil defence, what was a DHB, and other immunisation type programs for months and months. So that was our kind of biggest contribution in the theatres area to the community. And our focus areas going into this year, the library, for instance, was the last local government institution to still have, even under the traffic light system, mandates for entry. Everywhere else was free. So we have both in theatres and libraries, it's about rebuilding our audiences, regrowing our audiences. Again, people are still hesitant about being in big groups, apart from at concerts. So that's our real focus, is to bring back people, show them the new things and show them the things that have been embedded in the new ways that the community are doing things. And just to continue to develop our partnerships with community, both in the theatre, the libraries, and throughout in public places, which you will see impact on in the community, particularly Uawa, in this forthcoming year.
So for governance and democracy, planning is in place to support elected members to become effective leaders, and induction starts on the 10th of October, and that is the start of the training and development opportunity. We're working with teams to ensure effective Māori participation in council decision making, and that's kicking off with, I believe, what is the next report. And we're continuing to monitor and improve the quality of reports. Our NZIER benchmarking draft mark is promising at just over the local government average and up on last year. At the moment, we'll announce that officially when it's no longer a draft. Continuing to upgrade the core information services systems. It's a big piece of work. Streamlining business processes, and the health and safety culture is being developed and continuing to be developed, so that we're really, that is a priority for the internal partnerships hub.
Kia ora tātou, on behalf of Anita Reedy, Director Engagement Māori Responsiveness. Highlights for our hub this year, which will also be part of the work that we carry into, that we continue, I should say, is good progress in terms of our treaty relationships. There's some exciting new things happening. Iwi technical trial, some funding gone towards tangata whenua participation and plan making, and the likes. Our potential adoption of our Te Tiriti Compass today, certainly not preempting a decision, but these are really, I guess, game-changing spaces that we're attempting to move in terms of our enduring treaty relationships. Comms engagement, done heaps of consultations and engagements, and what is listed only scratches the surface, really. On top of this, we've answered hundreds of media requests and put out significant amounts of media releases and supported all hubs in their external communications and projects and plans. This financial year will begin early engagement on the LTP. We will have some new social media platforms in our suite of engagement and communication tools, which should enhance our reach. We've set a really solid base for future improvements in delivering great customer service and on our customer service promise. With our introduction of point of service surveys, this will be a 2-year program of improvements across council till our results speak for themselves. We've delivered on our commitments to townships, and we've kept the lines of communication open to ensure we do what we say we're going to do. We will continue to seek additional funding to help the offset of the cost of township upgrades so that we can deliver more. Again, focus areas. We'll just continue, I think, with in terms of our treaty journey, is continue to build and grow the capacity not only of council but the organisation as well, but being clear that we really want to set the direction at this table. We will continue to developing the tools to assist council staff and our ability to respond as meaningful treaty partners. But again, that's informed by the direction that is set out here. Increased participation, early engagement for LTP, telling our stories campaigns to drive our positive profile. Implementation of the quality improvement circle to deliver on customer service promise. And township upgrades, a continual focus on delivering those and building the regional capacity to deliver on those plans. Kia ora tātou.
Morena tātou, I'm lucky last. So some highlights from the science and monitoring area. So as was mentioned by Nadine earlier, we secured over $2 million worth of funding from MFE to support a program of works to restore the Māori and the order of the Tūranganui estuary system. So that's focusing on our urban streams that feed into the estuary system. A lot of the work last year was on the planning and the programming, and also really enhancing our relationships with mana whenua so we can deliver that program of works in a positive way. You will have seen some activity began right at the beginning of this financial year in terms of planting and getting out on the ground. We also developed the Poverty Bay Flats groundwater model in partnership with mana whenua and also with our stakeholders. We're now progressing that model even further to include water quality. The focus of the first stage of the model was on water quantity. Should also mention we did first stage of bore drilling up the coast. So at Uwawa, we got those bores drilled, got the results back, and we'll be expanding that program. And also seems like a small thing, but makes a big difference to communities. Got some live stream video of the Hikawai River and the Waipawa River, so people can see in real time what's happening during flood events, rather than trying to interpret our graphs and information that comes through that way. Strategic planning or strategic policy and planning. So a big focus for the team was the Tairāwhiti resource management plan review. So we initiated a full review of our current resource management plan, focusing on the 3 key areas in phase 1, which is freshwater planning, urban growth and development, and also the regional policy statement, which is that overarching strategy and direction for resource management in the region. We also got our climate change program in place. So that's with a focus on both adaptation, but also reducing carbon emissions. A sort of unexpected piece of work was pulling together an application to the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund that Kaino Ora was running to accelerate housing supply. And we received just over $4 million to fast track housing supply in the Tarahiru area and also to the west of the hospital. Worked really closely with both asset managers and our consenting teams to pull that together. And then our community policy work, kept trucking on as well. So we updated some bylaws, got a new gambling policy in place, and also made changes to the procurement policy. So the focus for this year, it's a long list, so I am not going to read it all. I guess the top item is the TRMP review. That is a huge piece of work and remains very much a strong focus for the whole of the hub, because we also need the science and monitoring teams to provide the evidence base to let those around this table make good decisions. But also not to forget, we've still got our climate change program, still working on transport planning, and Mr. Wilson touched on that in terms of that mode shift work that's happening. Still looking at water security and resilience. And we're also trying to respond to that huge piece of work that's happening at a national level, reforming the resource management system. Thanks very much. Oh, Pauline.
So this is just administration sort of things and the process with it before opening up to some of the questions with it. So in terms of the report that you have in front of you, there will be subject to some minor edits and formatting that goes through. And in one of it, you'll notice that there is just a draft letter from the auditors, but it's not signed, and it also hasn't got the page numbers. The page numbers is at the completion of the final document. So it's just the minor edits, they sign off, put in their things with regards to when they see a full and final document completed. In terms of the other processes that has occurred, it is a big document that you have, and we try to get that document to you. So you have a reasonable, if not impossible, time to read the whole document. And so one of those things was the compromising of sending that information, at least try to get it a week beforehand, as to have the full and complete parts of it. And in front of you, there were some minor, we've got a change sheet. On the front pages, there are some minor edits that have been notified. But on the latter part is the group consolidation. Now, the group consolidation is council's position. We will have always council's position. And then we have on another set of accounts is the consolidating the council's position plus GHL, our CCTO. And we minus, with any transaction between ourselves out of it, that's what's called the consolidation process. In terms of that, because of some of the delays, significant delays in our timeframes, which are pretty tight, and to deliver for this annual report by this meeting, as I noted before, no other, certainly unitary councils and many of the others haven't delivered that, and that will be close to Christmas. But we had strict timelines, and in some of that process that occurred, we were expecting to have that consolidation piece signed off at about the 5th of September. Due to those kind of delays, we perhaps didn't hear to it to about the 16th. And so where we had a decision that when the final information do the consolidation, we could have delayed your reports with that group in there. We decided to do that over the weekend, update the information and table it today. So you had more of a time to read the report. So that's just the technical administration process.
Thank you for that, Pauline. Okay, councillors, so I will give a quick reflection. I'm happy to move the recommendations and then I'll open it to the floor. I'm very happy to remove the recommendations on page 26. I do want to take the opportunity to thank Nadine and her staff. What a year it has been. As we were going through, I was thinking, we so quickly forget everything that affected us in this year, where our facilities wasn't open for everyone, where we sometimes had to run facilities on limited numbers or even close facilities because staff were affected by COVID. So, and then inflation and supply chain issues came our way. So, what's that? I never stand up. Why would I stand up? I'm not standing up. I never stand up, Pat. The chair never stands up. Anyway, thank you for nothing, Pat. What I was trying to say is we want to say thank you to our staff. We know there are heaps of challenges that we still have ahead of us. Thank you for the presentation you have made to us, showing us what each of the hubs still want to achieve, what we need to focus on. These challenges are not behind us. They are still alongside us. It was not good yesterday morning on the news when on the national news, they said a new wave of COVID is starting in the UK and the United States. So it's not behind us yet, but we've learned a lot. I do want you to extend thanks to our team on behalf of councillors. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Burdett. I'll open the floor. You know, you don't have to stand.
Yes, I do. There's two issues for me, and this is a very good report, but it doesn't address the burning questions that I've had for a long time. Firstly, our sewage into the river and sea. When I came into council, that was an issue. And the other ongoing issue for me is Peel Street toilets. And I reckon Neville West and his team have done a great job to now. But are we actually putting enough resource into that area to fix the sewage into the sea? Almost weekly, there are letters to the paper complaining about it. In terms of this, the toilets, well, I've put up with from some of my fellow councillors over a long time. They should be pulled down. Well, I can assure you there's one person not far from Ruatoria who's visited my house on a number of occasions, who will fight the council all the way to ensure that it's refurbished to the standard that we expect. That's me anyway. Your
Thank
worship.
you for that, councillor Petit. Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the council officers for a really comprehensive report, but there are just a couple of things I'd like to make an observation about in case it's missed. And I think it is really commendable that the rate contribution to the activities of this council for the year was only 43%. Remembering that the rate percentage was around 6%, without being absolutely accurate, and 6.5, I believe, for this year, the rates are still quite high. So I'm really saying if the rates are still quite high, they contribute only 43% in this past year. It is absolutely due to good efforts of council officers securing a number of substantial grants, but it does bother me that we might not be able to do very much and keep the rates at an affordable level going forward. So I just think we need to think about the balance between 43% and all of the activity that we have going on if there's not all of that large sum of money that we've achieved on top of that. There's just the odd thing that hasn't been noted, and I won't make a fuss about it, but can you please look at the project highlights with around walking and cycling, and that may need to be amended.
What page?
Well, there's two different page numbers. It's page 63 of 468. I've drawn it to the Chief Executive's attention this morning, and it just might get amended in the change sheet because it's not actually, there is no consent available, and neither has it been lodged just yet. And then the one further thing which I think have noted through here, and it actually is of relevance to those of us who went last night and listened to the directors of TFL refer to the forestry valuation. So they're busy being extremely concerned about the value of Tairāwhiti farms and the substantial increase in its value due to it being rated at the fair value for that property. When you look at the note around here on revenue from other gains, which is absolutely correct, I'm not suggesting this is wrong at all, but our revenue gains or losses on changes in the fair value of forestry assets has gone down. So we can't have one entity telling us on the one hand, we've put the value of the farms has gone up so much because it's now rated on its fair value and it should be forestry. That's just the value. And then in our own document, and it is true that the value of forestry has gone down. I'm not doubting this figure here at all. And that's just a couple of things that I pick up out of interest, and I just reflect on it because of what we heard last night. So thank you for the report. Obviously, we haven't been able to read every last word, which is probably a good thing, but we thank council officers for the work they've put into it. Cheers.
Thank you. Any other comments or observations? Councillor Dowsing and then Councillor Wharehinga. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stand up and unlike Pat, I'll make a bad example, hopefully. I had a similar point on the reliance on rates, and it's presented here as a reduction in the reliance on rates, but the reality is that we relied on exactly the amount of rates we budgeted for. So we had the same reliance on rates, and we'll have the same reliance forever. We're reliant on rates. The other part to that is that whilst we had a large increase in funding for capital projects, a lot of that funding is related to events that impacted on our infrastructure. So we didn't get ahead with that extra funding, we stayed in the same place. And well, yeah, as Councillor Woolston points out, probably went backwards. Not through any fault of our own, obviously. That's what those negative events cause. They cause negative outcomes. So the other part I wanted to focus on was in the presentation around governance, and it's very good. It's really good to see that there's going to be support and training for governors going forward. I feel as if my time here, well, besides the fact I no longer fit my suits, and I'm going to need to take some hair dyeing advice from Councillor Akawata Brown. It feels like this job is ballooning into something that should be closer to a full-time position. The size and scope of what we're working on continues to grow, and the emphasis on participatory democracy means that we actually need to invest more time than less. I feel as if this term for me hasn't been as successful as it could because I haven't been able to apply the time. So I'm glad to see that there is governance training and support in the plan going forward. and I hope staff have everything they need to achieve that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wharehinga, you've got a comment?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. I do just want to support the general sentiment that I'm sure is shared around the table in regards to the annual plan. I want to acknowledge staff and all of the hard mahi. I do just want to speak life to one part in here which hasn't been kind of included in the highlights, but is mentioned in the substantive report. It's around our building consents and the fact that inside the organisation we're going to be aiming for 90% compliance by Q2 2023. I just wanted to speak life to that because we no doubt have all been engaged by different people in the community. We all know that what those issues are and what it's about to achieve that level of compliance, but it hardens me to see us aiming for that Q2 next year. Because these are the only measures by which we can kind of hold the organisation accountable as elected members. And we're transitioning, this is our last council meeting, we're transitioning into an entirely different iteration of council. So I wanted to make sure that I was speaking life to this and that this would be something that the next council would also be cognizant of moving into 2023. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. Any last comments? Anyone that want to? Larry and then Councillor Worsnop. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank staff and everything on a great performance with the annual plan. This is our end of the triennial, and it's so good to see that the work that's been done over the year and the investment that we've had and the relationship we have with government to get the funding to come in as well. That's been a big plus, and that's due to the Mayor's great relationship and our CEO and all our staff actually being interactive with government and getting that funding. I do have a little bugbear, and it's with DrainWise, like with Councillor Bird there. Like we have had 2 events over the last month, which is unfortunate, and I know they've been really strong weather events, and we have made good progress on DrainWise. We've made fantastic. But when we've got the 3 waters coming in, I do have a question and I hope the commitment is still going to be there to continue the DrainWise project even harder to try and achieve a higher percentage of less outfall. So that would be a question I'm asking. Because we have no indication really so far about where 3 waters is going in relation to our DrainWise program. So, but congratulations, a fantastic year, and we've got heaps of work to go ahead. Hopefully I'll be able to contribute next time around.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, do you want to comment?
Through Your Worship, the DrainWise program is part of the wet weather and dry weather overflow consent that council now has. So anybody who takes the consent going forward has to keep maintaining DrainWise. It's part of the consent. They also have to report to the Wastewater Management Committee and the Tangata Whenua reference group around how they're tracking their progress. There's progress parts in that consent, and it gets reviewed every 5 years. So it has to keep being delivered no matter who's in charge of it.
Councillor Worsnop.
Thank you. I don't remember the last time I stood up, but thank you. So again, thank you for reporting. It obviously is a mammoth amount of paper. Thankfully, I didn't have to print it. So no doubt we saved a few trees, although the region seems to have still more to spare than we had 3 years ago. I want to, in particular, acknowledge, and it's mentioned in the report, but I'd like to reinforce it, the work of, in particular, the townships crew. There's been a step change in the way that townships are treated in the term that I've been involved, and it's really noticeable on the ground. I want to acknowledge them, and I want to acknowledge the fact that they're being given the ability to use their initiative and to connect with people and actually deliver on what they say. And that's really critical at a community level. If you can do what you say you'll do, the community they'll walk alongside you as far as you want to go. I would like to also acknowledge the catchments and land management teams and Yannick and Joe's work. It's been a pleasure working with them. I think that, again, the closer you are to the community, and these guys are embedded in it, the closer you are, the more you actually get to leverage the people who who don't even get paid, but they give you their time willingly. You know, they want to see good outcomes and they want to help deliver those. You guys have already covered my main bugbear with the report, and that was that we are selling as positive something that's a deeply negative. We're the recipient of funding because our region got smashed. So it is quite, there's a small amount that isn't, but the bulk is. And that's Waka Kotahi is extending, I suppose, emergency works funding, but the extent that it is extended may still not yet get us back to where we were before all these events. So we need to be mindful of that. It is going to be a long, slow grind back to a position where in particular, our roading network is in a better state. And I think we need to be realistic about that, because that's going to land in next year. It's going to land in a new term, and it's going to require a lot more being on Wellington doors, no doubt. Probably my last point, and that's one that I would leave the incumbents with and any councillors who are incoming in the next term. On page 155, we have 29% of people thinking that we are making good decisions around this table. So we've justified that a little bit by saying, well, 400 people might not be enough to give us a good representation of what people really think. Well, I say then sample 800, sample 1,200 if you need to. But let's understand why 29% of people are with us and the balance don't seem to be. That's really, really critical. This role is not just governance, it's also representation. If we have that kind of metric, we are actually not fulfilling both roles. So that's my final point to make. I found this incredibly, I guess, steep learning curve. It's been phenomenal, the amount that people around this table are required to understand and know, and I agree with Shannon. It is a far, far bigger job than the part-time position would allude to. It is immensely complex for everyone who works within the organisation. You absolutely manage a beast. It is nothing, there's nothing comparable in the private sector, and not even close. So my final words are thank you for the work this year. I know it's been an uphill battle. I know it hasn't all been easy, but I'd like to acknowledge the fact that you get up and do that every day, and you do it professionally. Thank you very much.
Okay. If there are no more questions, I do have a mover and a seconder. It was moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Burdett. All in favour, contrary, carried. Thank you. So what we're going to do next is the Gisborne Herald will take a picture. Winsley, how do you want us to sit? Just like around the table, because I know staff are going to take a picture as well. Okay, everyone, Jerry, sit up straight. Oh my God. No, but I think
You're not having morning tea yet, are you?
10 o'clock, Winsley. So what we will do is have a cup. So what we will do is, I thought that's why you rang me at 1. one. So we're going to go to page 299 of 468. So I'll open the floor and hand over to Terina and Jean. Well, we all got the notice to wear pink today. Look at that, all of us. Yes, so I'll hand over to Jean and Terina, and just remember your microphone, you can leave it on, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, o te anō tēnā tātou. Tuatai ake nā runga, I tēnei o ngā hui ngā whakamutunga me ki, o tēnei o ngā kaunihere me mihi katika. Me mihi katika kia koutou kari te huki mai, a tērā tau, mea koutou mahi i ngā tauko hori. Hari te mahi noa, no reira kia koutou, e mihi ana, koutou anō, kua tonoa kia whako, kia huki mai, ki tēnei o ngā whare, pai kia kaha, I roto I o koutou haerenga I ngā rangi tata nei, e nā wai rā, hei ngā wiki tata nei, ka uru mai tētai kaunihira hau, kia hapai tonu I nei mahi a koutou, no reira, kia koutou e aku rangatira, tēnei au kamihi. I think I feel quite happy to be standing here after many months, I think, of wānanga, and I just think that the report that's been submitted today for consideration and decision is a culmination of all of that, and really reflects, I think, where we have been as an institution of local government, not just Gisborne District Council, but more importantly, I think it absolutely reflects where the nation is heading, where central government is requiring the nation to head, and I really just want to mihi and commend the way that you as a council, a group of governors and leaders stepped into this wānanga and in this kōrero. I certainly acknowledge all the mahi in terms of our hononga tiriti, our treaty responsibilities, our obligations, our relationships that have gone before the establishment of our Māori responsiveness team, but with having some focused programmed capacity and resource to actually start to focus on, I guess, these higher level strategic levers that will build and grow our capacity as an organisation. I really acknowledge the whittle that was accepted by you as a group of councillors, and taking up the challenge to start in here and set the direction here. As I said, it is really important, I think, for where the country's heading in the future, and I think that this lovely report that's been pulled together by Terina, mihi ana kia koe, mō mahi Terina, is a culmination of that, and I'm really looking forward to the wānanga and any questions that we have today. So, kia ora tātou.
Thank you for that. Councillors, any questions, queries? We're on page 299. Councillor Robinson, thank you.
Kia ora, Jean, and I'd like to move this paper. Yeah, I want to tautoko your words and also just note the my gratitude to the team for preparing this paper, and also that it set out what is really some challenging and very transformative reasoning behind this paper. And having that set out is really saying to this room and to our community and broader beyond Te Tairāwhiti, this is what we're thinking, this is why we're thinking, and this is the direction we're going. And it's the right direction. And this room has decided it's the right direction. And if it takes 30 years for the rest of the country to catch up with us, so be it. But I'm really proud of this mahi, and very happy to be able to move this paper. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Akwaha Brown.
Sorry, I was too slow. I was happy to move it too, but I will of course second this recommendation. And from my heart, really say thank you. When I first arrived into this space, things were quite a unique space in its essence of what it was as a governing body. And so seeing this journey, we talk about journeys a lot in our region, the navigations projects and all of these things. We talk of a journey, and it has been a journey. It's been a journey for me too, in understanding the aspirations of tangata whenua, mana whenua here in Tairāwhiti. Because while I was born here, and I have lived here all 52 years of my life, I'm from the Waikato. So I learned a term, rāwaho, around those that are of another iwi distinction, governing in another land. And it's been a privilege. So the journey we've been on too is, hasn't been an easy one. So I want to commend staff, because I know that when we talk of anything to do with relationship te tiriti, in regards to who we are as New Zealanders in this space, it can create quite hostile frustrations, etc. And I've been in that space many times. So I know that the intent, this is what I love about this report, it's got a strong stance on its intent to do governance and to do partnership and to be tūturu tikanga and true to what I believe will be a great and aspirational hope for the generations that inherit a lot of our decision-making processes. But my question, I do have a question, respect to tautoko, all of this, is are we able to continue to sustain or continue to support the challenging dialogue that comes in this space? How have staff and, you know, the wider commitment from the council, you know, are we managing that space well? So the intent isn't that someone will feel less important or with regard to dealing with Te Tiriti workshop stuff. You know, are we all on the same walker paddling in the same direction? How are we managing or sustaining that relationship side of things? Because I know it's not an overnight relationship wise, it has to take time. So I just wondered how are people's feelings in that space being taken into account with regard to what we're doing here today?
Tēnā koe, Councillor Akuata Brown. Yeah, quite a broad question, but a good one. And again, part of a journey. We're probably 183 years, I think, post-settlement, post-treaty signing, excuse me. And it's going to take a lot more than our team was established at the end of January last year. So that's a year and a half's worth of effort. It's going to take a little bit more than that, not only from the team, but it is going to be a journey for everybody. And again, I'm a firm believer in the direction is set at a governance and a decision-making level. And I think that our consideration of some consistent guidance at this table really creates a space where we can start to connect the intent that's been laid over on our operational side, but then it is a journey. And we, just like everything else, we're going to have to continue to learn, to grow, to develop and to adapt. And probably the biggest thing that we all need to consider is that if we create a space that we can step into it confidently, and safely, I think therein lies the opportunity for wānanga to be had, because everybody will be at differing levels in terms of their level of understanding, their level of confidence around our historical context as Aotearoa and our bicultural foundation. So absolutely a first iteration. This isn't the silver bullet. What this does is it sets a foundation for our internal compass and our internal guidance as a group of elected members and as an operational council about what we need to be considering and how we need to be moving into that space. So it will absolutely be a journey, but first iteration, we need to start somewhere. Kia ora.
Thank you. We're still standing. Yes. Okay. So my comments. Hang on, see if I can read them. All right. Broadly, that, you know, I get where you're coming from. A year and a half with progress. Early days. Obviously, there's a lot of will behind this. My concerns, and I do have a couple with this. My primary concern is that we are committing the next council to this, and this is potentially a very different council coming in. And our presumption with this is very much that we need to, I guess, bring in expertise that might not be around the table, and that's a nod to, in particular, the deficiencies that we might have run across in the past. And I do think there would be value in having the eyes of the fresh table on this before it is, like this is a draft at the moment. In my view, it should remain a draft until those people have a chance to grapple with it, particularly because it is very high level. And because it is so high level, it's really possible to like it's impossible to use it as a guide. How do you reconcile tensions that will inevitably result as a result of obviously mana whenua's priorities will not always be exactly the same as council priorities. That's simply the nature of, you know, people and the fact that we have interests. That's not to say that any of them are wrong, but staff will need guidance as to how to navigate that process. This isn't at that level, and it isn't, I don't think, intended to be, but the people who are going to be committed and bound by this should have a means of understanding how that will be applied. What does it mean for example, you know, resource consents? What does it mean for? And it's not possible, I don't think, at this stage and at this level for us to say that, because it's a framework and but it needs to be applied. It's pointless unless it's in practice. And so for me anyway, I'm not sure that I would want to arrive at the first meeting and inherit this, not having known how it was intended to be applied, what it would potentially cost, because I suspect it needs budget, right? So those are my comments on it. I know it's got a mover and a seconder, but those were things that I did want to raise. Thank you for your work, though. I know I've really appreciated the way you've done the work. You've taken what could have been an enormously fraught process, and you've made it really natural, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Morena, thank you for your comments, Councillor Worsnop. I guess one of the things to remember is that it's a foundational starting point, but you're right in terms of implementation needs clarity, and that's why it's one of the next steps in terms of, if we understand first that there is a commitment to these particular pieces that are included in the framework, then we can commit the time needed to provide the implementation guidance across our activities in support of it. Otherwise, what we would potentially do as a team is commit quite a lot of our capacity and resource and time into developing implementation guidance on things that could be changed again at this table, and then require again really explicit implementation guidance, if that makes sense. And so in that sense, this is the first step. One, understand that those are definitely the commitments that we're willing to make in terms of how we navigate our different pieces of work in relationship with tangata whenua, and that we are taking an articles-based approach as opposed to in past ad hoc principles-based approach. And then two, be able to then undertake a series of implementation guidance to support staff uptake on this strategic direction. I would note that we often undertake strategic priorities, outcomes and objectives and vision statements as council. One example of that is our LTP, and we don't provide implementation guidance on that to staff. And so I just want to provide that as an example, that sometimes you need to test something in practice before the silver bullet of implementation guidance can really be solidified. And then as well, the broadness of some of the commitments that are provided in the second column acknowledges the level of flexibility that we need to have as a partner in order to first seek to explore and understand the perspective of tangata whenua before undertaking to then jointly design the response together. And so that kind of covers some of that broadness. But I will leave that. I don't think I need to wax on anymore. But kia ora and thank you for your comments.
Just supplementary to that, the likes of the LTP are kind of bounded by things, like they're limited by the budget, the amount that you can extract from rates, etc. I guess I'd be interested in your view on what a table that did incorporate some very strong mana whenua individuals who had the capacity in their own mana to reach out and ask for a mandate from tangata whenua. Would it be possible for those individuals to sit at that table and represent partnership at this table, or is it not possible for council in itself to be a partner? Because that's what I would hope that would be possible.
I think it's already possible. This table has a strong sense of leadership and has already exemplified that through partnership mechanisms with tangata whenua. I don't think the desire and ability to lead and be a good partner depends solely on the next set of elected representatives. I think what this provides is a common understanding of our expectations of ourselves. It doesn't necessarily change the ability to have bilateral, individual, or collective discussions and leadership in that space together, but it does provide us with an understanding and provide staff with an understanding of the expectations that this table has of how we intersect with, provide advice to support and enhance those discussions. It also provides an opportunity for that incoming table to have a hand in that implementation guidance and what it really looks like in practice.
Councillor Dowsing, thank you.
Thank you. Like Councillor Worsnop, actually, I struggled with whether we should be moving something that's indicated of medium significance and actually has a quite a long reach, but I came to terms with it through the belief that council is this is a council document. It's not a document about the individuals sitting at this table. And when we talk about tangata whenua, for example, in this document, we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about a people that is continuous. So, so I'm happy that we're just setting the first footstep in place, and that those who follow will walk this journey. I'm not as fast, however, with the compass as a model for giving direction here, particularly given that the compass is a tool, provides you direction, and actually with this one we're going in all 4 directions at the same time. It's also not a tool. It's also not used in the way a modern compass is used for measuring, which is, you know, providing changes in direction for particular aspects. So I don't see this, I see this as a diagram, not so much as a useful tool. So I think there's probably a better way to display and provide guidance around that than the circular compass format. But yeah, there's a problem for someone else. Thanks.
Anyone else wanted to have any comments? Did you want to respond?
Tēnā koe, Councillor Dowsing, and I was just sort of going to respond and build on what Terina had mentioned before around and her response around implementation. And yep, that may not be a finished tool or a framework, but what it does, again, I'll just reiterate, is it sets a foundational platform for questions, discussions, and considerations to be consistently had across this table that we've never ever had before. And I think what it does is it provides the platform for the incoming councillors to be able to start those conversations and then to arrive on the guidance, the specific guidance that you've suggested. And obviously, as conversations continue, what implementation looks like. And, you know, I just do want to draw our attention to the back page, and we have the treaty article, our commitment, and then the standard we desire. That is a very fluid framework, if you like, in terms of we're not over-committing, we're not under-committing. It creates a space where we all go into that conversation with a collective understanding of what it is that we need to be considering and discussing. And probably the last thing I would like to mention is if we're looking at that compass and we're looking at some of the words or the representations on this document that we're unsure about, well, he tohu tēra, is that we all need to build and grow our capacity and understanding. If that may not be making so much sense to us right now, but we will certainly committed to the incoming group to build and grow as we did with yourselves in months past to get to this iterations. Kia ora.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to say anything. When I read this, I thought to myself, and I've just briefly spoken to our man over there prior to this part of the meeting. You know, in Maridam, when someone stands to speak, you put the credentials in front of those you're speaking to so they understand who you are, what your background is, and your right to make statements. That's the reason I spoke earlier. The issue for me, in Maridam, leadership is there, Hapu is here, and hapu involves and embraces whānau. They are the strength. They are the people that have the mana. In our case, and I'm only going to talk about Ngāti Porou, no one else, no other tribe. We never see our leadership. We wouldn't have a clue what they're on about. And yet council, through this ordinance from council, from government, are required to get into bed with iwi leadership all around the district. So I'll start at the beginning, and you all know where I come from. My nanny, my great nanny, was Mere Wharepapa. My nanny was Lillian Haig. My father was Maori. I'm a trustee of 2 maraes and a chair of several subcommittees. So, kapai, Trina, good report. But as you said earlier, it's the start. And it's a long journey. We all understand that. It's going to be a long journey. Not overnight and not in the next 2 or 3 years. But the chance to cement all this is over the next 1 or 2 terms. Now we have Maori representations going to sit around the table and provided it is receptive to both bodies, what is put in front of the council, the elected councillors, it'll work. That's where I see the issue, hapu not understanding, not being told, and they should be inclusive going forward. I will not get into any more, otherwise I'll get myself into trouble. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the contributions. Thank you for the work both of you and your team has done with us and guiding us through this process. I have a mover for this report. If no one else wants to comment or have a question, mover in Councillor Robinson, a seconder in Councillor Akuata Brown, all in favour, contrary, carried. Thank you, team. Okay, we move to our Mangahauini flood control scheme. Who is going to talk to us about that? Mr. Wilson, thank you. Oh, you guys are just like boom, boom. Mr. Wilson, I'm interested. Who seconded? Josh, did you second it? You can see everyone has had cake and coffee. Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Through your worship, happy to take the paper as read. The scheme has had to have some work done to it, or it could have would have fallen into the awa. So a lot of work was the emergency work that has had to happen in order to make that school safe, but then also to help retrain the river back into where it needed to be. So a lot of it was just damage to the existing scheme. We're after the extra funding to finish it, to make sure that we've got a level of service to protect the Tokomaru Bay community. So I'm sure the table can appreciate there's been a fair too many events back to back there, hence why we didn't wait and we got the work underway, given we'd had 2 events within a 9-month period. We're not optimistic about leaving anything too long there.
Any questions or queries? Thank you, Councillor Petit.
I commend Dave and the crew, those contractors, they've done a marvellous job. I travel that road regularly and I see all the work that's being done. I go and visit my relations in Toko, mainly those that haven't had anything done to their houses because they ring me up. But what work has been done has been brilliant. Sure.
Sure, thank you for that. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Wilson. I've got a mover in Councillor Dowsing, second in Councillor Wharehinga, all in favour, contrary, carried. Okay, we go to page 320 and I'm happy to move Councillor Seymour as Commissioner to chair the District Licensing Committee. Thank you for the team that's prepared this. It's self-explanatory. You all the information in front of you. You also have one massive document talking about the yes, the DLC. Okay, so moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Akuata Brown. Hands in the air. Thank you, unanimous. Thank you for that. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to introduce you to our new team leader of the environmental health team, Vincenzo.
Hello, Vincenzo.
You may recognise him. You were part of his ceremony to come here as a citizen. So it's very cool to be back in the chambers. So thank you, team.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Yes, and I just want to take the opportunity also to thank Pat for the years that she has done that, led the committee, worked with other committee members. So thank you for continuing the work, but also just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work you've done on our behalf. Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, we are going to, what page are we next at? The housing. Thank you. Okay, so who is going to speak? Transition to a new following Nadine. Heather Con, thank you.
Here's the thing, through you, your worship. It's actually, Nadine has all these delegations. So it's just really acknowledging the process. So if you wanted to, it could just be a notice of content of the report.
Thank you. So it's straightforward. Everyone sees we do that every term. Moved by Councillor Faulkner, seconded by Councillor Worsnop. Any questions or queries? It's quite straightforward. Thank you for the report. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay. We are on page 396. This is just a noting report. Ms. Noble, do you want to, oh, there she is. Do you want to give us a quick kōrero around this? And then this is noting, you can see the regional work that has happened here, but council has played a significant role in pulling this all together.
So thank you, Chair. Yes, this report has attached to it the new regional housing strategy, which has been adopted by Rotepu Rauora. Council does have several actions within that housing strategy, so I've identified those within the report and just given a quick update on what we're doing in order to deliver those actions. As you'll see, we are either progressing or have plans to progress them all. And there'll be a regional housing steering committee has been established to oversee how the strategy is rolling out and make sure everyone is playing their part and try and remove barriers where they exist. So any questions?
Moved by Councillor Burdett. Yes. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you for the report. My question is, when with consenting with Kaingaora, with the different areas where there's new development happening under the umbrella, is there any ability for the community to have any input into that consent process? I'm talking about location or anything like that, because there's a lot of these developments happening around the place, which is fantastic. But there's some communities like to have some input into the process. So is there any ability for any part of the community to have that input?
So through you, your worship, it will depend on the location, the scale of the development, the level of change from the existing character of the neighbourhood to what's proposed. So you'll have seen some kind of aura developments have been publicly notified or limited notified. Others won't be notified because either they have the written approval of the neighbouring properties or the change in the type of development is not assessed as having a more than minor effect. So it really does depend on location and what's proposed.
Councillor Worsnop, Councillor Seymour after her.
My question was just on page 402, where it talks about the transition to the new resource management reform process, potentially taking 10 years. And obviously a big driver behind the resource management reform is just how hard it is to do everything. 10 years is a long, long time. We've obviously got our priorities, and our priorities with regards to, in particular, our housing issues, presumably mean that it won't take us 10 years. Am I wrong?
So through you, your worship, so we will be making improvements to our existing plan through our TRMP review, and that won't take 10 years. The housing changes will happen within the next sort of 2 years. We don't know yet where we are in terms of the phased approach to transitioning to the new acts. We know that MFE is planning to phase that transition and have tranches. So different councils, different regions will be in different tranches. We don't know yet where we sit. And I can't give you more information than that at this point in time. I'm sorry. I wish I could.
Sorry. Just to clarify then, so we potentially will need to revisit our TRMP, having enacted what we can with a suite of options that we have. We may need to revisit it, or we will need to revisit it within 10 years at additional cost to ratepayers.
So through you, your worship, I mean, under the existing RMA, we have to revisit our plans within 10 years anyway. So that's no change there. Probably the biggest change will be doing the regional spatial strategy, and that's the first step of transitioning to the new reform and the involvement that central government and other parties will have in that process. From that, we will then see to what extent, if any, we need to change our existing plans, or if it's more just transitioning to a new format.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report, and I always have an interest in housing. I just, and I know this is not the same duration as the presentation, but the figures are quite different to the presentation that we had a few weeks ago at a workshop where there was really a large, very large number of houses deemed to be necessary. I'm looking at page 401 and the funding and programming of infrastructure needed to support the housing development. And for the incoming council, all of that page has got huge costs to this council. And while it highlights at the top of that lot, the Tairāwhiti block and the infrastructure that's been installed to meet the needs of that subdivision, we've got other subdivisions, quite substantial ones in Wainui Road, for example, where we don't have capacity to take those people on board. I don't need the explanation today, but I'd like to flag that, you know, this organisation needs to think about how we have prioritised what areas actually get support and a larger pipe, so that they're, because on site of that subdivision, they have to pay for the infrastructure themselves, but we need to put in the capacity to meet their infrastructure as it connects to our total system. So I think there's some work to do for us to enable other areas to become connected, and that all comes at a cost. So I just flag for the future council that it is really important, because that is an area, the Wainui Road area is an area that's not spreading to our highly productive flats. It is an area that's been signalled for housing for quite some time, could accommodate no doubt quite a few location houses and different densities, just as others are doing. So I just think, and this is a good piece of work, but there's a whole lot of work behind it that needs to happen in the new term. So I just want to flag that. Thank you.
Okay. I have a mover in Councillor Burdett. I do not have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Okay, we move to our last report for the day. Councillor Seymour, I'll hand over to your capable hands. So both Councillor Seymour and myself declared an interest in this report.
For the record and for those who are listening, the War Memorial Theatre Trust has an MOU with Council, and under that MOU we are required to report to Council. So we would have had our AGM on Monday if the world did not turn it into a holiday. So this has, we do have the information, we've had it for ages. It has not been tabled to the War Memorial Theatre Trust formally. They do have the documentation. Normally I present it after we've had our AGM, but we're now having it next Monday. So you will see, and it will be given good publicity following the trust AGM, that, and we did give advice and seek confirmation from the chief executive that it was reasonable to fund that fund of 200,000 at Sunrise to establish a fund in perpetuity that we hope others who enjoy the theatre, and I mean theatre in all its very many forms, because it is so well used by so many different organisations, and it's not just all formal theatres we might know it, it's young people doing all sorts of different things, that fund might be established that people could add to, which then gives council access to more substantial money that might be available from the ratepayers. So if you read the whole thing, and I suspect some people might not have, so I just thought I'd pull out a couple of figures. Post the actual report here, but it is noted further through, post the 31 June, we have funded $66,000 worth of improvements, and in fact new installations of the heat pumps cooling systems to the War Memorial Theatre, which replaced the old ones which were put in at the time of the upgrade, and they've reached the end of their useful life. We do have a list of this. Oh yes, I acknowledge Ms. Walsh is in the room, and she has presented us with other smaller capital items which the trust will consider next Monday, and that's always been the process. So Penny Walsh, as manager, presents to the trust items that she would like to see funded that are to enhance the experience for either the users who enjoy the theatre or those who participate in the theatre. So a broad support of either theatre. So having given you that extra bit of information, the recommendation is just that the report be received, and I'm happy to
move it.
I'm happy to move it, Madam Chair.
Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Petit.
And I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any questions of interest. Shannon has, I can see he's brewing it.
I was expecting less of my presentation.
You've got 5 minutes.
So I will just again, like I said earlier, want to acknowledge, Pat, those of you that were on the council with us way back 2 terms ago. It was a massive piece of work where we fundraised $6 million. How many platters of sandwiches and concerts did we organize, Pat? Pat, people were hiding behind their cars if they saw Pat coming, because she would be asking for $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000 investment. But let me tell you, the group of people Pat pulled together raised $5.7 million to help with the build of the War Memorial Theatre, and also what has happened to the Lawson Field Theatre. So it's been a massive piece of work. The committee we meet often. We now have been in a great position where we can take a chunk of that money and invest it for future generations to then do work to the theatres that are needed as we go forward. So again, I just want to acknowledge Pat and the massive work that she led in that area, and how now we're looking at those 2 community facilities. And it's true what Pat said, it's not only opera and ballet. I was, Councillor Robinson and myself were at the Diwali Festival in the Rose Room on Saturday, where there were hundreds of young people playing, eating, dancing. So those theatres and the spaces around it are used by all of our community. So on behalf of us, just thank you very much.
We should acknowledge, Madam Chair, that TT did give us 3 million, about 5.7, but 2.7 million is still quite a lot of hard work to flush out another 2.7. But TT did, Trust Tairāwhiti did support it as well. So we thank those trustees.
Yes, we do thank all our.
You weren't one.
Hello, I'm just going to call us to order because we're still in a formal council meeting. Did I put the motion?
No, you didn't. No.
So I have a mover, Councillor Seymour, seconded Councillor Petit. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Councillor Petit.
I think too, I mean, you've already waxed lyrical on that committee and headed up by Pat, the trustees. But I said, let's not forget to myself. Let's not forget the effort put into by David and his staff and the contractors. We were so fortunate as we went through the process of building it or refurbishing War Memorial Theatre. David reported to us both financially and progress on the War Memorial Authority on a monthly basis. So we knew exactly where we were going. There was no overspend, etc. I just thought I'd note that.
Thank you for that. Well, councillors, I am going to close our official meeting for now. We will get back together tonight. No, why are you not here? What?
So, Madam Chair, I'd just like to, no, well, several of us can't be there, you know.
Who cannot be here tonight? Because then.
I never accepted.
Ah.
So, Madam Chair, I'd just like to acknowledge my time on council. I think that's appropriate because this is what we've done in the past, if you remember. So I particularly want to acknowledge the people of Uawa and then subsequently Tairāwhiti Uawa, who supported my election to this council over a number of years and who we've worked with really closely. But without their support, I wouldn't have been here for the length of time that I've been here. It was a privilege to work with and for those people of Uawa and the coast and others around the district who called on various things. I want to acknowledge the council officers, and it's always really difficult to sit here with our back to you, which is not very polite. So I know that it's a challenge to work in this environment and that you all do your very best all of the time, and your teams do too. We might challenge some of those things, but actually, if your heart wasn't in it, you wouldn't stay here. So I actually do appreciate what council officers do and what their teams do. And I really want to observe that bureaucracy has made council officers tasks much more difficult over 21 years. And I personally know that up to 10 years ago, you could achieve as a councillor a lot more for your community than we can directly achieve now. We probably get there in the end, but it's a lot harder. And that really is a change that Wellington's bureaucracy has dumped on local government. And we've seen it and we've commented on it around here, but over that period of time, it certainly is really obvious how much change there's been from bureaucracy. I want to pay tribute to our emergency services crews, all of them, but very particularly our internal civil defence teams, particularly because I'm really familiar with how much work that they've done in Uawa and then subsequently Uawa Tairāwhiti over years. And regrettably, apart from unfortunate things happening occasionally at Te Karakia, it is generally the coast that experiences the worst of our heavy rainfall events and the worst of the circumstances that follow. So I really do appreciate David and your team, the people that work in that civil defence arena and then work with the community link, who aren't our staff. They simply are the men and women who live in the community, who turn out, and David mentioned it earlier in his report from the AGM, in our annual report. They turn out because they care about their community and they put themselves on the line and their own lives on the line often, which I know probably scares Nadine as a person responsible in the end, but to save other people or to see that the rest of their community is safe. So I think we should never lose sight of the work that our community civil defence teams deliver. So I think that one of my other comments were referencing last night, and the interesting comments that I won't repeat, but for those who are there, and I'm sure the Gisborne Herald's going to repeat some of the work from the holding company, I reflected on that as I drove home. And 21 years ago, under Mayor John Clark, there was a push to sell the farms, and when a whole bunch of us, some who are still around the table and some who've left already, turned up on day one, it was determined that Tawhipara farms, who'd already been tendered at that point, would not be sold and the port would be sold. So I just want to say to everyone that whoever ends up around this table in the next little while are going to be the people that will make the decisions around the potentially 5 options that were alluded to last night as to what are the assets that our holding company will keep and will hopefully manage in the interests of our community. And lastly, I just want to thank everyone for their friendship around the table. We're not all that close to one another, but we're all professional in our relationship, and wish those who are seeking re-election all the very best. And thank you for the time we've had around here.
Well. So Pat, you're not going to get away that easily. I'm ready. I thought you were coming tonight, but I'm ready. So everyone can sit. I'll stand. I don't usually stand during the meeting, but I'll stand now. So I I remember the first day I got into council in 2010, I had no idea what I put myself forward for. I arrived here, had no idea what was even allowed in the building, what time do I turn up. There was no induction in those days. You just turned up, and Pat took me under her wing and showed me around and helped me to learn the processes. It took me a good term to get my feet under the ground and to know what was going on, how the processes work, how to contribute, what type of questions to ask. So just from personally, I want to thank you, Pat, for especially those early days. And then I've got a lovely CV here that I'm going to read for Pat. So Pat has served 7 terms, which are 21 years at the Gisborne District Council, and you have contributed so much, not only at our council, but at the community. And I will be attending parties up and down the coast in the next while where the community will be saying, thank you, Pat, thank you for being part, thank you for reaching out. Pat is the one that if there's a flood, she's on the phone, she delivers food. During COVID, she would be the one checking in with a checkpoint people, giving Pat's beautiful tomato jam. So really on the ground, knowing everyone, ringing Padre, asking what's going on at the marae, knowing all and everyone there and working alongside the community. Pat first came to Gisborne for a holiday in 1964 as an 18-year-old. Can you believe that? And that's when she met her future husband, whangara farmer Nick Seymour. With 3 children in tow, and we know how difficult it is to run a household, run a career, but Pat did it all. Pat's long career in our community service started and its beginnings were in Plunkett, where she eventually became the national president in the 1990s. Over the years, Pat has served on the former Cook Hospital Board, Crown Health Enterprise Board, Area Health Board, Gisborne East Coast REAP, as a trustee of the H.B. Williams Memorial Library Book Trust, and also for 9 years as the director of the QET National Trust. Pat's community service has extended also to national politics, and we know she has been in charge and worked and been on the national board as well for national politics and also serving our community that way. Also a member of the Nursing Council of New Zealand. The work that Pat has done has not gone unnoticed. In 1994, Pat received an OBE for service to the community, and in 2019 was awarded a Queen's Service Order for her services to local government and the community. With a passion for the environment, farming and agriculture, Pat has always represented the people of Tawhiti Ua and the whole of Tairāwhiti with respect and dignity. The Gisborne District Council has been lucky enough to have Pat chair some of our committees when we still had the Environment, Planning and Regulations Committee, Regional Transport, and she's also the chair of District Licensing, as you know, and our Hearings Committee. For a time, she was also a regional sector representative. And then, like we said in our earlier report, Pat was the chair and the driver behind the fundraising for our War Memorial Theatre funds, as well as the Lawson Field Theatre. Pat, we're going to miss you. Who's going to drink coffee with me? Because you and I match each other litre by litre. Thank you for the leadership, the courage. You ask the tough questions. You are here with your community voice, your community hat on. We will miss you, I'm sure. We will hear a lot still from you, because up the coast, people will still ring you and say, Pat, you need to ask the council this, or you need to check into this. So thank you for looking after our community. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up with you outside of council. Thank you very much.
The gifts get handed over, I thought I would just take an opportunity on behalf of the staff. I've known Councillor Seymour for it will be 13 years now. I've sat around this table, and I've got a few facts for people that since 2001 we've got 650 RFSs that have been lodged under Councillor Seymour, keeping us 300 of them are roading issues alone. So a strong advocate for the Uawa and Tukumaru Tawhiti Uawa Ward. and for the community at large. Very strong advocate in terms of weed and pest control, and we thought you would appreciate this. But want to acknowledge the hard work that you've put around the table, and I for one have certainly seen the changes in terms of decision making that's been made at this table and the contribution that you've also made. So we want to acknowledge your work, and I'm sure some of the staff that we're going to attend tonight will be missing that they are able to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It reminded me when I saw that coming up, actually. I was driving into council one day there. It was a nice sunny day, and I looked up at Kaiti Hill there, and it was beautiful pink colour all along the faces, and oh, that's pretty cool, you know, nice and pink and that. And then we stepped into council. Next minute, Councillor Seymour steps in. She's got this pile of weeds in her hand. She dumps it on the table. This bloody Sinisio's got to go, you know. So yeah, when I saw that coming, I thought. So about a week later, I was going along the dunes at Okatu, picking out Sinisios. So yeah, Pat was always good for props. The other prop that she was good of, and this was something with Councillor Bald and I. I hope this doesn't sound mean, Pat. But we used to take bets on how many times she'd throw her glasses onto the table, and then that advanced to the next bet was when would she break them. And the only time I've seen her stop mid-sense was when one day she actually did break them. They did break them, but it's just a reflection of the passion that Pat's brought to the role. She's always had that passion. She's always contributed hugely. And it has been appreciated by the Uawa community, but more importantly, the whole community. So Pat, well done. You've been here longer than me and probably going to be the only one soon. So yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.
I just want to speak on behalf of the rural community. Obviously, we're probably better prepared tonight, but off the cuff, Pat, there wouldn't be anybody who's committed more to our rural communities than yourself. There are very few people just getting about their everyday jobs who know how to navigate this process. They don't know how to drive any of the changes that they might think are a great idea or things that impact them in their everyday life. And so what they do is they contact people like Pat, and not just one of them. There would be probably thousands of them over the years, and each one of them has a different thing that you individually have to pick up and carry. And sometimes you carry that for years. And Pat has done that with incredibly broad and strong shoulders. She's brought people along the way and has explained what is often a very frustrating process to people. I think often you feel the passion, you probably get it from me as well, but the people who are behind her, that she's doing it for, they don't understand the bureaucracy that ties this place up in knots. And so for her to persist through that and to drive outcomes, we've all seen, I think the most recent one's probably Makarori, but there will have been an absolute legacy of those, and our rural communities will dearly miss having you at this table. I don't think probably can express their thanks enough for the service that you've given. And not just as a politician, that service is personal. When you go home, you don't get to leave your responsibilities as a rural representative in this building. It follows you everywhere. You've been a councillor every minute of your life for the last 21 years. Thank you so much for that service.
Yeah, Pat, I'd just like to say thank you as being an awesome colleague over my 9 years here. It's been fantastic to work with you, and being part of the hearings committee as well. I'd just like to say on my behalf, and I'm sure Josh's behalf, the way you chair those meetings is absolutely amazing. People come into this environment, it's intimidating, and just your demeanour, you make people feel really comfortable in that environment and brings out the best of them when they're presenting their submissions to hearings and so forth. So and I've learned so much from you as well, being on those hearings committees. So yeah, thank you so much, and you're going to be sorely missed. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Well, I was hoping you'd be here tonight, but you're not. And I've only served these 3 years with you, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I really acknowledge your intellect. We've had some really cool discussions behind the scenes, the dark side of the dark side. And I want to just acknowledge as a person, Pat, your service has been spoken of. I can't say that enough, but I think you're a really spectacular person and it's been a pleasure working with you.
Oh, Josh, you want to say something? as
Yeah,
well?
it does behoove me actually to stand and say something. Pat, I've had the benefit of being mentored by you in a lot of these spaces, particularly around DLC, particularly in regards to hearings training. And while we all know and acknowledge that there's this really deep knowing around the systems and the form of things inside council, what I've been able to witness being alongside you while we've worked on these kinds of things is this really strong community heart and community drive behind stuff. I mean, it was through us following really strong process, but also knowing and being in touch with our community while we made some really, what I thought were great decisions as a DLC. They unfortunately got over, some of them unfortunately got overturned by ALA, but be that as it may, we made the right decision by the process and by the community. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that, yes, there's a strong systems focus, there's a strong cheering focus, strong rural focus in bent, but there's also the strong community focus, the strong well-being focus for our community. I've grown as a councillor by being on all of these things with you, Pat, and I really wanted to acknowledge you. Yes, the council will sorely miss you, but I personally will sorely miss you if I do manage to get back on the game. But regardless of, I will miss being around this table.
Thanks. Kieran stole my thunder about talking about the farming community, and our thanks to you, Pat, for that. My focus today is actually to publicly acknowledge and thank Nick for sharing.
Yes. Kia ora, Pat. So I've got a couple of things. It's mostly because I know you do love my husband's furniture as such. So this is a piece of cowrie that was actually from the harbour master's house. So it's just
that's pretty.
But when I first got on council, I thought Patricia Seymour was one of the harshest, intense, kind of like, wow, she's pretty full on, this lady. And I think I even went home to my husband, I think she's my nemesis. Because I know I would drive you probably crazy sometimes with some of my rhetoric, which I drive most of you wouldn't hear crazy with. But I would love that you were forthright. You were it's a frustration to be in bureaucracy when you just want to get things done and you're a doer, you're an activator, you want to make it happen and see it done, see it completed, etc. And you're part of a process that's not so streamlined into the doing space at times. I want to thank you for challenging me to think about the questions I ask, to consider my role in community, because that's my passion too. I thank you for being such a staunch advocate for Uawa. Tawhiti, I mean, they couldn't get a more staunch advocate every meeting. We had to step up our game. Who are we advocating for in this space? But you just were always just straight up, and your questions to the finances as such was always something I would just relax in, because I knew you would come into that space and ask those big questions about the budgets and the fine. I remember one time coming in here and you'd noted an I missing a dot, a T without a cross, and I said, wow, the semantics of just the making sure reports were professional. And I love that because I love grammar. So I've got this book I want to give you as well, because you did remind me of this person, and I only paid $5 for it because I wasn't sure I'd pay more for it. But Judith and you. Thank you so much.
Let's thank Jason, because I will enjoy that. I like Jason's work. Thank you.
I'll be really brief. Pat, you absolutely set the bar for effort in this room. No one could have worked harder. My efforts pale in comparison. Thank you for setting that standard so high. And I think if it wasn't for you, I would have got my own way this whole time I've been on council. You are by far the best debater in this room.
Oh, thanks for the comment. No,
Am I allowed?
absolutely.
Well, I thought I was going to get the opportunity to wax lyrical tonight, Pat, but when you told me you weren't going to be there, I thought, bugger it. You know, Ming and I went out to a meeting in Waimata. This was before council determined to seal the road. And the main complaint there was dust. The rally team that were going through. And Pat was also there, so was Nick. And most of the Waimata Valley were there. And it got quite angry, the whole meeting. And then just out of nowhere, this voice said, "That's enough." And we looked around, it was Pat. Went quiet. We carried on, good decisions were made, and coming back in the car with Ming, I said, "Shoot, that woman." This is not long after I first got in, or she first got into council. I said, "That woman's got a bit of mana." Well, what I was leading up to, the same thing happened in Tolaga. I used to come down to the meetings there because my area started at Onora and went north. And Tolaga meetings could be quite volatile too. But she was in control. But the point I'm making is they all loved her. You know, and if she'd stood again, she would have flown in, despite the fact that someone might have put their hand up in opposition. All of the nice things have been said by my colleagues, our colleagues around the table, Pat. And yeah, I acknowledge Nick. Pat and I probably talk more than anybody else on the phone about different issues. But one thing we have learnt, if you want to achieve something in council, you target it and you lobby these fellas. And ultimately, if you spend time at it, you'll get what you've aimed for. And she was like a worrying little bloody fox terrier. She never let go. So Pat, enjoy the retirement, go and see the mokos. Keep Nick, you know, he's a hell of a nice guy, Nick. We went to a national party meeting over at the other side of the river. And I just happened to be sitting on the table with Nick and his friend. Pat was basically in charge there, even though she wasn't the boss. She was running it. Yeah. And she came over and went like this to Nick. And he turned and looked at me and said, "What do you reckon, Bill? Should I get up?" I said, "Well, if I was you, I would." However, I just want to say thank you for all those years, you know, when you took over from me in Toko and Nora, in the backcountry there, people kept ringing. My relations from Waipiro and Whareponga kept ringing. But she was always there. And when she wasn't, I helped out. I just think there should be an apprenticeship for councillors so they learn what they're in for before they come in here, and knowing how difficult at times it can be. But that's beside the point. I just want to wish you well in retirement, Pat. I know Nick has said you're going to travel. You've already travelled, been in Wales. I think when I listened to our mayor read off that list of achievements over the years, did you have any time for Nick and the family? Really, I mean,
multitask.
Eh?
She's a woman. She's done it all.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'm not going to say much more. I for one will miss you because you're the one person I could rely on. Yeah, even though Nick told me at times she's a pain, sure.
Yeah, that's so lovely. So for those of you that don't know, Pat is our Senecio queen. And when I ask staff to please get $100 worth of flowers for Pat, so I was expecting a bunch of flowers because I looked at these flowers, I thought, oh my goodie. So now I know. Pat, here's a tiny little gift from us. When you wear it, think of us, and we hope to see you in here often. Thank you. absolutely. Yes. Your microphone back, microphone.
All the best, Bill, and for your long service around this table. Yours is even longer than mine. To those who are not standing, thank you for your contribution that you've made. Amazing words you just shared, Shannon. And all the best to those who are seeking your election again. Winsley, we really want a photo of this.
Yes.
Everybody's got it growing in their garden's got to pull it out. There you go.
Thank you for the good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can take a few photos, have a coffee, and then we come back at 12. So we've got, yeah. Yeah. So we'll be back at 12. So let's take some pictures, do some things. It won't be long. And then meeting closed. Thank you. And we'll